planning committee. Item 1 on the agenda of the minutes. Is it your wish, members, we sign this track record?
Yeah.
Councillor?
I also apologise, Chair. My name isn't appear on the apologies list.
And you did apologise?
I did to you personally by email.
It must have been, that was my fault then. So, Chairman's not. Are you happy we include that as my fault? Right, it's on the minutes of the correct record otherwise. Sorry about that, Councillor Robertson. Item 2, apologies for absence. There can't be any because we're a full house.
No, apologies for cancellation.
That's right, there is one. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Interest disposal.
Well, it's possibly not disclosable, but we're looking at site 5, aren't we, on Ashby Road, which is just basically just above up the road from the site. So I think too far for it to influence me, but I do live in the vicinity.
Okay. Well, it doesn't sound like you're too close, are you?
Actually, interest.
Good. No. Okay, thank you. No other ones. Party whipping arrangements.
No.
Members of the public, that means we don't get together as political groups to decide how we're going to vote beforehand. Most definitely not. There are 2 applications that we're not going to listen to tonight, which are both the applications in Malton. The first one on page 42 is a delegated approval, and the second application, which is on page 47, is withdrawn. So we're only doing with the first 2 and the enforcement. Just a few bits of housekeeping, which I'm sure you've heard them before, members of the public. The fire alarm rings, please go out the way you came in, because it won't be a test, most definitely. Please switch your mobile devices to silent. If it goes off, it's £10 for a noisy ring and £5 for a little ring to the chairman's charity, and we won't let you get out the door. Speaker will have 3 minutes, and after that you'll be asked to wind up. The proceedings are being recorded. That is the only opportunity for you to speak, so please, I'm sure you're not going to, don't interrupt during the rest of the debate. Don't clap, hiss, cheer, boo, stand up, wave your arms, or do anything else, please. I'm sure you won't. And you'll see officers talking at the same time as you, which looks extremely bad manners. They are trying to answer the points that you're making at the time, so there's no delay at the end of you speaking. And I think we can, after that, we can go to the very first application with a bit of luck. In fact, with a lot of luck. We can go to Byfield, and the application number is 0495.
Thanks, Chairman. Members will see from the report that this site has been the subject of a previous planning approval in outline for 8 dwellings with a Section 106 agreement to secure an affordable house. Current application before committee is a revised scheme, effectively to omit the affordable house on site, but in lieu of that, secure payment towards an affordable unit elsewhere off site. These types of applications aren't approached lightly, but the proposal has been scrutinised in accordance with the Council's Housing Supplementary Planning document, which does allow for exceptions to providing affordable housing on site in lieu of financial contributions. That has been adhered to, and as you'll see, the advice of the affordable housing officer is that this is an appropriate way of dealing with this particular application. And accordingly, Chairman, we're advising the application be approved, subject to the 106 to secure that payment.
Thank you, Ivan. We have 2 speakers. First of all, Mr. Gillick from the Parish Council.
Thank you, Chairman. Byfield Parish Council has worked with Farrells over the last few years with this application, and principle of housing we have no objection to, and indeed it will probably provide traffic road benefits on just outside the site. We objected originally. Our original objection is around the removal of the provision of affordable housing. There was originally 3 proposed. We're concerned that even though there is only 1, we don't feel confident that there's been enough contact made with the 2 providers that have properties directly opposite this site. Northamptonshire Rural Housing have told us that they've no record of being contacted. Now, I've no way of exploring all of their contacts with the Affordable Housing Officer, but we do have a concern about that. And our other concern is that, particularly with the changes that are coming to local government in this area, that this ring fence, that this sum of money should be ring fenced for Byfield. We've been advised that that's not possible, so we may find ourselves in a situation where we're not having one affordable house that was offered to us, which could have been used for perhaps a specific purpose, such as an older person or a person with disabilities, and that money is spent to the far side of the street at some point in the future, which seems incongruous, shall we say. So our concerns are primarily that this money is, that Northamptonshire Rural Housing should be able to provide support for a property within feet of where they have existing properties, and secondly that the ring fence sum, if that's what you agree, is kept for Byfield. It's ring fence for Byfield, even if perhaps that is for just for 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next person is Mr. Manners, who's the agent.
Thank you. My client in this case is Farrell, who are the owner of the site. They're not a housing developer. You will have seen from the papers that they got planning permission last year, but when they came to try and have the site valued to pass it on to a developer, we're told that the site wouldn't be viable, which is why we came back with the next application to say it wasn't possible to meet the council's preferred policy requirement of providing them 3 houses on the site. And as the previous speaker has said, in this case, we went through the sort of the council's tests for establishing that viability, and it was the council's housing officer that has advised us that it's not suitable to be able to provide just a single house on this site, because there are registered providers who prefer to have groups of houses elsewhere that they can manage much more efficiently. So in this case, we've been very much led by the council's officers. I think it's important to all that there be sort of certainty with any decisions made. And by providing the payment, that would be very much more certain to my client so that they could easily sell the site and then reinvest that money into the business that they're interested in doing, which is buying and selling agricultural machinery and employing people within that so they can move on and be able to sell the site for its redevelopment. So hopefully you could support the application on that basis.
Thank you, sir. Local member, Councillor Scott.
Yeah. Yeah, I was at the parish council meeting on the 5th of November, and I support the parish council, but I'm very interested in other people's opinions who perhaps have on the planning committee longer than I have. Are there issues I'm not aware of, or that that none of us have taken into account? What's other people's view?
I'm sure officers will fill you in a second. Councillor Owens.
Yes, I think for me, I can understand Byfield that would like to have an affordable house. So could we go, because it is advised in page 19. It's advised that such sum cannot be ring-fenced as such contribution are secure for a district-wide need. Could we say we could ring-fence the sum for a certain time until for Byfield and another developer or pool house, so that the first point is Byfield, and if nothing can be done for Byfield, it goes out of Byfield. That is a suggestion that I have. I don't know on planning grounds that could be. So basically, Byfield as the first sherry, the people of the sherry, and after other village can have all district-wide.
Thank you. Maria, what do you want to ask now?
If I could just cover one point and I'll put it on, Chairman.
Okay.
Yeah, just in respect of contact with other housing associations, the Affordable Housing Officer did contact the Parish Council by email on the 31st of October and I quote, "I contacted several housing associations, including Futures Housing and North Hants Rural Housing Association, who have properties nearby. Because there was only one property, none of the housing associations were interested in taking this on, so financial contribution was the only alternative option, and that's in accordance effectively with the SPD."
Second point.
And with regard to, how we work section 106 is usually, the intention is to get the affordable housing as near to the source of the funding as possible. So usually section 106 is worded, if you ring-fence it too tightly, there's a risk that the money ends up going back to the owner or the applicant. So it would normally be, ideally, within the parish, but then that does allow a cascade, so that could be ultimately anywhere within the district, because we definitely know we can meet, we do have need for affordable housing, and we can use our community sums in a range of ways to make sure that we get that.
Okay, come back.
Sorry, with this explanation, I will go with officer advice. So it's a proposal for me.
You propose that? Do you have a second, David? Thank you, Ken. Would you like to speak now?
There's not really very much to say here, is there? It's technically clear cut, and so I'm happy to propose it. So second.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Councillor Ritchie, you put your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm well aware that people sell land for money and developers build houses for profit. But surely as planning, what we're about is creating a suitable environment for places like Byfield. Here we have got a sort of, if you like, a virgin site, and they can decide where they're going to build within it. It is up to the developer to decide how to use it. If you can't build an affordable house here, then where are you going to build an affordable house? It has already been accepted that they're not going to build the 40% that would normally require for a development in a rural area. To say that you can't even have one, I just find absolutely amazing. Members of this committee will be aware of a lot of media coverage recently, over the last few months, of the efforts that developers make to get around the need to build affordable houses, and of the way in which some councils are bullied into being along with the developer. I was astonished to hear that the applicant had been led to make this application by the council's officers. I would like to hear from the council officers what advice they gave to the applicant. Did they actually advise? Did they advise that the applicant should seek a way of avoiding this council's own criteria?
Bernard, would you like
I think Eamon has got.
Eamon, okay.
Again, for members and for members' consideration, you'll see the site clearly isn't a virgin site, it's a brownfield site. The issues with regard to viability, etc., were assessed under the previous applications and judged to be acceptable by the local planning authority. In respect to the current application before committee, the applicants originally came in advising that they did not intend to provide an affordable house. It was with officers' negotiations to secure the payment rather than seeing the affordable unit being lost. So it wasn't a case of officers inviting the applicant to submit an application without affordable housing. It was responding to an application with full commitment to affordable housing that the officers negotiated the need to provide the community sum. In addition to that, as we've already alluded to, there are no housing associations who are willing to take on one unit on this particular site. And as set out in the supplementary planning document, which is adopted by this council, the approach to take a financial contribution for off-site provision elsewhere is allowed, but in very exceptional circumstances. Those exceptional circumstances have been applied to this particular site, and that is the reason why we were recommending the application be approved, Chairman.
Thank you. Any more speakers? If not, then we'll propose the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Those against? 2. The application is approved. Next application is in Abbey South, and it says Abbey North as well, 0706.
Very much to the late representations were further officer comments provided in terms of environmental health officers and the requirement to refer to the Secretary of State. For those members who reported this application, previous permission was granted earlier this year for retail development comprising sort of large units, etc., just to you can see on the location plan. Current application is seeking some minor amendments to that in respect of two aspects. One is the enlargement of a mezzanine floor, which is internal within Unit A, and the other is the provision of an external display retail area just to the back end of Unit A to provide, as I say, an outdoor retail area for that particular unit. The application is a Section 73 application, so it means that we can only really deal with the proposed changes at hand. It is not an opportunity to revisit the principle or other details that have previously been determined by the authority. And as you'll see from the report, we have considered the impact of the additional retail floor space in terms of viability in the town centre. And the independent consultant advises that there's an acceptable level of impact as a result of that increase. In terms of the external area, again, we've assessed that in terms of its impact on the amenity of surrounding residential properties and judged that to be acceptable with the various conditions that are attached to the recommendation. One further comment is in respect of highway safety and the ability of vehicles to manoeuvre within the site. Again, you'll see from the Highway Authority's comments that they have raised no objections to the proposal as a result of the external retail areas being introduced. We still feel that the proposal will work in highway safety terms. Accordingly, Chairman, we recommend the application be approved.
Thank you, Raymond. We have two speakers. First of all, Mrs. Tweedale from the Town Council.
Thank you, Chair. So when the Town Council met on the 3rd of October, we've reviewed the variation of conditions and we've got no objection at all to the introduction of a mezzanine level. But did feel that we weren't keen on the idea of the outside garden space. We'd also got serious concerns in regards to safety that the proposed variation will have on the access and egress for delivery vehicles within the service area. We do note the points raised by the highway consultant, but we still have concerns about the access and egress for delivery vehicles on site. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the agent. I hope I pronounced it right. Camasani?
Yeah, you got it right.
All right.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm Canseni. I'm from WIG. We're here on behalf of the applicant. As the officers have said, the application is seeking a minor amendment to the previous permission for the site. It's to allow for an insertion of a mezzanine floor space and also an external garden area as well. The application has been submitted by additional highway information and special path drawings and also a retail assessment, and there are no objections from the Highway Authority on highway grounds, and the retail report has demonstrated that there is no impact to and it's acceptable and it meets the test of national policy. Since the previous application was approved, the planning policies remain valid, and I invite you to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Two local members, Abbey South, Councillor Evan and Councillor Wesley.
It's the other way around.
We've arranged it.
You arranged it, right? Councillor Wesley first then.
We know what range means, don't we?
Yeah, I know. Ben first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a few concerns about the about the access and that for the delivery, because it does look a little bit tight, but Highways are saying it's okay, and we're saying something. I don't think I've got really a leg to stand on to object to that. I just hope it does work properly and without too much detrimental effect. The one thing I'm not clear about is the acoustics and the soundproofing for the neighbouring for any of the neighbours in the local vicinity. I noticed there's the late representations, there's a note about that, but I'd just like clarification on what we are actually doing there, or what is being proposed. It does just look like a mesh fence, and I'm not sure how that works really.
Can I just, in terms of the site itself, I mean, it was subject to quite rigorous testing by environmental health officers. The site will have a acoustic fence around it. That black line that's on there is just being followed, and that is also conditioned. We're quickly looking to see what the condition number was. There is a condition on that to secure the actual physical details of the construction of the fence. You'll see there are the conditions in terms of construction management, etc. So that fence has been approved. That fence is not affected by this particular application. Obviously, the environmental health officer, in the point of the clarification of the late reps, is that he has taken account of that in considerations, but the acoustic fence stays, so that hasn't changed.
So we end up with two fences.
Well, yeah, you've got an internal fence, obviously, for that retail area to separate it from the vehicles.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that's fine. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Not really an awful lot to say, because all our consultees have returned no objections to the changes. Secretary of State doesn't want to look at it again, he's quite happy with what happened. And the changes that have been made, I think are all right. There's no problems there at all. So I'm happy with officer's advice. I'd like to propose that we approve it.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a second? Thanks to Wesley. You already spoken, so any more comments? Councillor Dowd.
Yeah, just refer to page 37, item 37, which is traffic calming in Ashby Road. So you may be aware of one interested in that. I'd just like to know what the state of play of that is. Have we a timeline, and what would be the nature of the traffic calming? Because although I live there, there are 4 school sites down the road which councillors ought to be aware of, and it's a bit of a racetrack and a nightmare at school arrival and leaving times, and I'm surprised there aren't more accidents and casualties along that road, and I think traffic calming is long overdue.
The simple answer, Chairman, through you, is that is a identical condition as previously approved. It's not affected by this particular application. And as you'll see, it's about prior to commencement, it hasn't commenced. So those details will be submitted to the local planning authority, and the local planning authority will consult as necessary on the technical aspects of those details.
And who would you be consulting on that? The schools, for instance, residents?
No, because it would be the highway authority, primarily would be the technical input on that. In terms of the detailing, those issues will have been dealt with on the previous application as a matter of routine, and the local planning authority judged that to be acceptable at that time, sufficient to impose this particular condition.
Okay. It's unfortunate the first application came in before you were a councillor, so...
Yeah, well, I can certainly look at that one. I was just interested. It sounds like there's nothing concrete at the moment, but then the ground hasn't been broken yet. So.
Well, again, Chairman, through you, the condition does refer to indicative drawings, so those indicative drawings at that particular time will have set out sort of the broad principles of the traffic calming measures for Ashby Road. So I'm more than happy to furnish you with that indicative drawing.
Right, presumably I can find that on the website myself.
Should do, yeah.
That's fine, thanks.
I would just like some reassurance on the extra work that has been done on the retail impact assessment. I remember a very, very long fat report that was, I don't think it was actually circulated to this committee, but it was certainly amongst the papers on the website when this proposal was first considered. And I remember that we talked very generally in terms of single summary figures for comparative, whatever the word is that you use for the other category of shops. But there were a couple of summary figures that we used rather than considering impacts when it came down to certain sort of types of shop. Now, you see a lot about the type of shop that has been considered if you want an outside garden centre area. I just wonder if there has been any, what is the, what would the impact assessment be if you were able to confine that research to shops that catered with outside garden centres, or indeed other garden centres? So I'm not sure that that actually is a factor now within Daventry town. People will, no doubt, will know that others that have got an outside garden centre, there are questions around about their viability at the moment. And I just wonder that if that indeed is the type of shop that is going to be built there, are we giving planning permission to something that would actually simply mess up the other plans that we have for shopping in Daventry?
Right.
It's quite a technical assessment, the retail impact assessment. And it's fair to say that you would be looking at types, the use classes, you wouldn't be looking at specific existing businesses in the town. You would be looking at the use classes and the potential impact because you'll recall from the original assessment was all about what would the impact of this development be on existing town centre shops. And we've got some conditions in there to make sure that some of that is managed, which was debated previously. But it's not going to be to that level of detail. It's going to be about the use classes. I mean, a range of shops can have outside space. That could be selling outdoor stuff. That could be so you can sit outside.
Okay. Right, we've got a proposal the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, again, please show.
6, 7, 8, 10.
Those against? The application's approved.
10 million.
I hope it starts tomorrow. If not the next day. You've heard that, agent. Right, we skip the next two and we go straight to the enforcement of the breach, alleged breach. Great.
Page number.
Oh, it's a key, isn't it? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be presenting this one. You started off with alleged breach. I think, yeah, that's somebody's view. It's not necessarily the officer's view. I'll just give you some background to this. It concerns that garage. You can see there the construction in that photograph. It's a bit further on than that now. In 2006, planning permission was granted for this garage as part of a rebuild Copper Beach into a two-storey house. There'd also been a previous permission back in 2004, garage in the same place, but orientated a different way around. The permission was implemented. A trench or base or hard standing is always required, so it remains valid. In 2010, planning permission was granted for 3 dwellings to replace the bungalow to the south of where the garage was going to be. And those properties would have had a sunken garden with retaining walls at the back and a conifer screen, which was shown on the approved plan, to be retained to protect, give adequate screening and privacy as it was put in the Factors and Design Statement. In 2018, the garage started to be built on top of the base or the hard standing that had previously been created. The neighbours inquired about this and they were informed that it was an old plan permission that was previously implemented, so therefore it's still valid, and now it has effectively been finished off in terms of they were constructing the garage. The actual remodelling of the bungalow copper bridge, as far as I know, never actually took place to any significance. So the bungalow pretty well remained as it was before. In the 2006 permission, which is what was shown on the approved plan, it was going to be converted almost into a two-storey dwelling. The neighbours say the garage is built in the wrong place, 2 to 3 metres further south than it should have been, i.e. nearer to their properties. Our investigation suggests that it's actually probably in the right place or thereabouts, and it may be slightly higher than approved, but it is nothing that could not be dealt with by dealing with something like a non-material amendment, just to deal with a slight increase in the ridge height. The neighbours are unhappy at the impact on their properties, and they're asking us to have it demolished because they say it's not in accordance with the approved plan. And we say that we think it is, so on that basis, clearly we don't feel we can enforce against it as it is per the permission granted. So on that basis, that's the recommendation in the report before you, that it would not be appropriate to take action against the garage on that basis, as it essentially complies with the planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Keith. We have 2 speakers. The first one in favour of enforcement, Mrs. Coleman. Sorry.
Would it be possible to provide some drawings, please, to councillors, because it aids in the discussion?
We've got it on screen.
These are the planning drawings. Is it possible? They're quite easy to understand.
We should have all the planning drawings on here.
We don't normally pass
not
drawings.
been shown.
We don't normally pass drawings.
They've not been shown. But it does aid in the
Which drawing is it?
Which drawing?
Which drawing is it? you want to show?
2006.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've got that drawing somewhere.
Is it that one?
I think it's under, no, it's not that one. I think it's under plans, and it's the second one under plans. That one?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No, I'm not being awkward, but we don't
No.
normally pass
Okay,
papers.
thank you. And we will be showing some photographs as well, because there has been some changes. Do I start my time now? Sorry. Thank you, Chair and councillors. We live at 6 Main Street, which is where you've seen from our bedroom windows the impact of this build. Can this build be effectively challenged? Yes. The drawings there are not to scale. There's no scale bar. There's no measurements on those drawings. And when we've effectively challenged measurements, then different datum points have been used to justify this build. This actually only proves that measurements alone cannot defend this build. What is irrefutable is it is significantly out of line with the approved drawings in a number of respects. Firstly, look at the drawings and see how the line of travel through the entrance to Copper Beach is actually at a dog leg. Definitely not straight ahead as shown on a previous photograph or in this photograph here, where you drive straight in. So on there is a dog leg entrance to the garage. Second, the alignment with the hall on that diagram. It aligns with the outer wall of the hall and also the car parking area. And the surveyor's measurements makes it 3 metres out from the current build. The measurement of 3 metres is confirmed by officers on the 3rd of May. And I quote from a letter to all parties, "The garage is likely being built outside the red line of approval by 2 to 3 metres and is a likely breach of planning control, and therefore must invite a retrospective planning application to address this." Now the boundary, if we can go back to the picture, any common sense look would see that it should be further back than the 1 metre it is from our boundary. It's 1 metre at the rear end. I must tell you that those trees that you see there are trees. Our boundary lies behind there. You cannot build that garage any closer to our houses or further away from the Copper Beech building itself. It's quite clearly built in the wrong place. Those trees we will now have to take down because you have a tiny gap like that. There will be no water getting to them. And imagine what we're looking at even more so from there. Daventry District Council records show a long history of objections to the garage being too close, its height, its mass, its overbearing. That's why plans were actually changed. It was moved back, and now in this build it's currently ignored, completely ignored. And the effect on us, it is significant, detrimental, overbearing at all levels, inside and outside in the garden. It affects daylight, sunlight, outlook and visual amenity. These aren't my words, these are the words that are in the report by officers today. The issues would be the same, even if there was a bungalow, because you see...
Finish now, please.
Oh, I haven't really had 3 minutes.
I'm sorry, but you have.
Right, I'm just going to show you that last picture. Even if it was a
I'm
bungalow,
sorry, but can you
it would be
finish now,
here,
please?
and that's what we're looking at.
I'm sorry, can you finish, please?
Do you want me to sum up, or am I finished?
No, you've finished, I'm afraid.
Well, I just want to correct one thing. We haven't asked for it just to be demolished. We haven't. We
With the
said, can
greatest
we
respect, you're
compromise on
not
the
doing yourself
height?
any good.
I'm sorry, but
You're not
there's a
doing yourself any good
misinformation.
by continuing, I can assure you. Against enforcement, we've got Mr. Price-Jones.
As you've already heard, in June 2006, Daventry granted planning permission for conversion and extension of Copper Beech. The planning permission related to specific drawings, one of which clearly showed the location of the new detached double garage, the drawing that was shown earlier. The current owners purchased Copper Beech in October 2017, following discussions with Daventry's planning department, when the owners sought to ensure matters were all in order. Work on the garage recommenced in early January 2018. However, on the 15th of January, Daventry's planning department advised they were investigating a potential breach of planning control. The complaints seemed to be the permission was not implemented and or the garage was not in the right place. The owners' concerns were deepened when the planning department advised that if they continued to build, they would be doing so at their own risk. At a meeting on the 20th of June, the planning department were provided with a plan showing the results of an independent topographical survey of the site. This was commissioned and paid for by the owners. The survey showed the garage to be precisely the correct location. On the 29th of June, the planning department advised that, and I quote, "Following our meeting, all relevant documents have been reviewed and senior officers believe there is a marginal breach in terms of location of the garage. However, a preliminary view has been formed and in the light of this marginal breach, it would not be expedient or appropriate to pursue enforcement action." Since the end of June, we have repeatedly asked the planning department to give us a final decision, a timetable for giving us a final decision, or just an explanation as to what further evidence they're waiting to receive. Their silence was only broken when we were notified that this report was to be presented today. The facts are the planning permission was implemented in time, the garage is not too long, too wide or too high, and it is not in the wrong place or so out of place as to warrant any action. As you've also heard, in September 2010, the Council granted permission for the demolition of Stonecroft at 4 Main Street and its replacement with the 3 terrace dwellings that are now there. The plans accompanying that application do not show Copper Beech in a converted and or extended form, and most importantly, the garage is nowhere to be seen. If the complainants have any issue in relation to the proximity of the garage, I would remind them that the onus was clearly on them to carry out proper inquiries before buying their homes.
Thank you, sir. Right, local member, Councillor Evans.
Can I just clarify the photograph, through the Chairman? These pictures are from 2006.
Which side? think they were taken in 2009 actually, according to the photographs. But that shows you, this photo in particular, shows you what's the other side of the hedge, so to speak, where the hard standing and the hard core is being laid down for the driveway. And obviously at that time the bungalow was on the other side of the conifer hedge.
So the significance of this photograph is that this would demonstrate a commencement on site. So the original planning application that is now being finished off was commenced and is therefore valid.
Okay. Councillor Robinson.
Yes, I can say because it's my ward, and I know that when I campaigned and I believe there was a base there in that investment. Now, it is true when you look at the photograph, you had an old bungalow, and after you have the three new houses, and it is overbearing. But now I need some clarification because we are in the room of enforcement here. And enforcement is not normal planning procedure. And if we have to understand if it's reasonable to enforce, if it's that overbearing, where's the responsibility lie? My concern, if it's true, it looks very overbearing from one side, but how much higher than the first planning application was given, because I do not believe it was in the wrong place. That was in the right place in the first instance, and because that was always there when I visited, so I never even questioned if it was the right place. I do think we will have a problem if we enforce to prove that it has been built in the wrong place. Now, the only position we can have, is it a bit too high? And I will ask officer for clarification and after member to see what we have, because in enforcement, we have to make sure that it's expedient and it's not a normal planning application. And unfortunately, I can see the position of the owner of 2, 4 and 6 that is very overbearing on them. But has Daventry, if Daventry has not been negligent in the planning, we cannot enforce something. So it's all about what are the proof of Daventry, and that is where I am. If it's a height, is it expedient to have enforcement? So can my councillor let me know how they feel about it?
Thank you. Chief?
Yeah, as far as we know in the report, if you read there, the officers have measured it, say it might be slightly higher at the eaves, but they're saying it was difficult to take the exact measurement. But having said that, they said even if it was, it's only marginal. And I don't think it makes a huge deal of difference. As I know we're talking about it being able to be dropped in the category of non-material amendment. So the issue really is, if you contemplate an enforcement action, is it really lawful? And I think our view is yes, it is. That it is in accordance with the approved plan, or indeed the act so little that we don't think it's worth taking any action against it to get it removed and get the height reduced by a tiny amount as it would be. We don't think it will have any serious difference to what you see there.
So can I ask, because if that is your view, and I have been on that planning committee for a long time, and enforcement is not something we normally have on that planning committee because the rule of are very special for enforcement. Can we put, because it's true, if they have to look at that wall, it has a detrimental effect. What can we put if the fence, or it's alleged that the conifers are going to die? What can we put as condition that at least they see hedges instead of a garage?
I think the honest answer is if you go back to the permission that's there, there was supposed to be a row of conifer trees kept on the application site. And I was shown as being the screen, and that's what was going to be there. So I was shown on the cross-section on the plan we've got somewhere. Can I just show the cross-section? Sorry, it's on there. It's a cross-section on the drawing, 2010 permissions, it's a cross-section on the drawing, that one there, 2010. If you drop Scott, sorry, not that one, the 2000, I'm getting confused now, sorry, the 2000.
2005?
Should have been on the 2010 one, and actually, yeah, I understand.
Is it on plans?
2010, it should be that one.
Was it second page, what was on the second
It's the
page?
second page on it. Sorry, that's it. There it is, to the bottom, go back one.
We used to have pieces of paper.
That's it. You see the cross section there, the conifers were retained, look. If you blow the drawing up showing you the cross section, the conifers were to be retained to protect the privacy of those properties and to obviously protect privacy looking the other way. So that's what the original plan was, to retain those conifers
They're not
on the
their
boundary at the
trees.
bottom of the garden.
They don't belong to that property.
So I will let, I am.
So basically, then, if they're not on the application site, there's nothing that could have been guaranteed that they would be kept in that case, if they're not on the application site. So I don't know why they put retaining conifers will be screening in the design and access statement that was submitted with that application. It clearly stated the conifer screen will be kept at the bottom to maintain privacy to the neighbour. The conifers are there on site, you can see they're there. And as I say, that old drawing that I showed you of it being implemented seems to show, that we looked at before, where you could see it from the height, seems to show the conifers at the side of the garage and then the old bungalow underneath. At the time the road was being laid out, so that was in the 2004 one. I'm sorry there's so many different pictures, but
Yes.
you can see why it's so confusing.
I know the site very
What we're
well.
trying to show you in the aerial photographs is nothing's changed on the ground. The bungalow's still the bungalow, and the distance from the garage is still the distance from the front wall of the bungalow to the garage is still the distance. That's why we say it can't move 3 metres to the south, because it hasn't changed.
Okay, Councillor Robinson.
No, thank you, Chair. Basically, I think the officers hit the nail on the head there by asking the question, is it lawful? And they think it is, and I think they're right. And I think we should therefore go with officers' advice.
That's a proposal.
That is.
Okay, do you have a second? Councillor Chandler, you wish to speak now?
Yeah, but all I wanted to say, Chairman, I'm happy to support that proposal because I was thinking of making it myself. If there is a fault anywhere, I don't think it lies here with this site or with this application. It lies with the later work that was done next door, with perhaps somebody not having carried out sufficient investigation of what was happening next door. A simple search would have shown that there was an extant permission, and that should have been investigated further before deciding exactly how to place and develop the other site, Chairman. But that's not for us, it's just a comment.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson has spoken. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. This is really confusing, isn't it? I don't think it's clear cut, and I'm just sort of failing to really get my head around the onus of whose responsibility is what here, and the level of enforcement, and what is provable and what isn't, and where that stands in the normal scheme of things. There does seem to be contention. I know you're saying as officers that nothing has changed, but there does seem something slightly odd to be going on, where the neighbours are saying that that hedge is their hedge, and it seems to be part of the other property. Now, if that is the case, then it would just to make it appear that there's something slightly awry somewhere. It's also on provability. We've got some mishmash of measurements, and I understand that it's really, really hard to measure and to get a point. But it would also be interesting to understand. We did hear an email read out where officers were agreeing that there was it had been moved by 3 metres at one point. Now, if that was just surmising, then that's sort of fair enough. Because of course, whether that base is started or not, and I'm not contesting that the build hadn't actually been started in time within the 3-year period. But of course that initial base could have been put in the wrong place, couldn't it? There's nothing to say that that hasn't always been wrong. I mean, just because it's there doesn't mean it's right. And I think it's just a mishmash. I feel really, I do understand as well the point that the checks should have been made. There was obviously a planning permission there. I mean, maybe somebody just assumed that it had passed and wasn't going to happen. I'm not sure, I can't answer that. But it does seem a pity that there couldn't have been some sort of compromise on height and distance when there was, there's no need to ram it right up against somebody's hedge and cause disturbance and distress. And that's what makes me uncomfortable with it. It just seems that someone's been a little bit awkward here for the sake of a couple of metres of gardening. And I think that's really, really disappointing. I'm still not sure on this one myself until I hear the...
I think, Chairman, what you have to remember is, at the time that was done, there was no planning permission to build 3 houses next door.
I understand that.
I mean, and as far as we're concerned, that was put in the right place, that was built where it was supposed to. That's why we showed the aerial photos really, to show that nothing has really changed. The conifer hedge is still there. The conifer hedge is still there today.
Can I ask why you thought that it was there? Is that email not true that's just been read out?
I personally am not aware of that email. I'm not denying the email exists. All I'm saying is, from the facts I can see, that's why we looked at aerial photographs. There's no way. If that garage was moved 3 metres on that photograph, it will be halfway down the embankment. So it always was that side of the conifers. It is that side of the conifers. It hasn't gone. The land is quite steeply sloped. So if it's gone 3 metres further, as I say, the distance we've measured from the front wall of the bungalow to the end of the hard standing you saw in the aerial photographs is around 30 metres. It's not 32 or 33 metres. That's what it's scaled at before. So as far as we're concerned, it's there or thereabouts.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the points I would have liked to raise have already been raised by Councillor Wesley. I mean, if I can just start from this business about measurements, is it possible, Chair, through you, that Mrs. Corner be asked who from whom the email to which she is referred actually came?
Yes,
it seems that the officers here are
I will find out
its
for you
existence.
this minute.
Yeah.
Could you just give me the name of the officer who sent the email?
Yeah, it was sent after a site visit where the measurements were taken on the 3rd of May.
sent it?
I don't know exactly what date the email came, it was Adam Kite.
Thank you.
This is for the current investigation.
So it came after a site visit. I'm interested to know what happened between that site visit and the email that was sent at this meeting, where we're being told that it seems to have been built essentially in the right place. Who was right, and what happened to change the collective view of the district council to this one? Why is that discrepancy there? Why is it kind of lack of clarity? I noticed that the agent, I assume it's the agent for Copper Beach, pronounced that it was in precisely the right location. Well, I just feel there's so much doubt about this that we need to be clear about what measurements were taken by officers and what was the advice there. My other concern, in fact, I understand that this is the particular photograph, the one that was there a moment ago. Is it possible to go back there? Is this what it's supposed to show?
I'll clarify that.
Yeah.
That is the original bungalow that was knocked down and the new houses created. So that is the source of the complaint, that site. And that clearly proves that the hard standing was down for the garage prior to that site being developed.
Basically, what will happen, Councillor, is whichever way this goes, if you go down an enforcement road, which I'm obviously telling you not to go, all these photographs will be put in front of a planning inspector, and he will look at the evidence. So basically what I have done is I have gone through all those files, I have looked at all that evidence, I have found that photograph of the 2006 application, but the photograph seems to be dated 2009. That is clearly showing that a commencement was made, so that's an argument. That is the plan we were talking about earlier that was provided by the applicant, showing his survey. He scales 29 metres from the front of the property there to the side of the garage. We're not so sure that is exactly how the property is today, because again, the plan that was originally shown on the 2006 permission, which we looked at earlier, doesn't show the property as it is today. That shows it, the property, how it was going to be altered, but that never happened. So that's part of the problem. The other thing is, you say about Mr. Kite writing that email, I asked him on the back of this to go out and actually measure what is the actual physical distance with a measuring tape on the side from the front of the bungalow to the side of the garage, and he's put in a report 30 metres. And if you look at the aerial photographs, it actually scales slightly less than that, 29 something, and it says 29 on that plan. But what it isn't is it isn't 32, it isn't 33, it isn't 2 or 3 metres further away. Because, as I say, because of the lie of the land and the conifer trees, we threw the conifer trees down the embankment into the neighbour's garden. There were some photos from the neighbour's side showing how steep it is at the back of that, property. And if that had come 2 or 3 metres further, obviously it would be virtually in their garden, and it isn't that far out.
Going the other way.
Can I then go back to the photograph that we're looking at before, of the hard standing, the photograph taken in 2009?
Well, if the neighbours have just muttered there that I think it's already 3 metres too far, and we've measured it at 30 metres, that would mean then that it has to be 27 metres from the front of the bungalow. And there is absolutely no way that it scales on site to 27 metres from the front of the bungalow, and it doesn't scale on the drawing at 27 metres from the front of the bungalow.
But on the point of this hard standing, this was 3 years after the award of the planning permission for a garage.
Well, the planning permission was for a redevelopment of Copper Beach.
That included a garage. Included a garage.
Yeah.
But 3 years later, well, the garage should be a sort of place where people might leave their car. Are you arguing that that actually constitutes the start of work in a garage?
Yeah. Basically, digging a trench constitutes the start of implementation of the planning permission. That's set out in planning law. You don't have to do a lot to implement the planning permission. So you just have to dig a trench, and that's sufficient. So what we're saying is that is some evidence that we found while going through the old files that a commencement had indeed been made, because those photographs are from 2009.
Okay. Just in conclusion, it just strikes me that this is one of these cases where planning regulations are absolutely insane. It's said very clearly in the report to us here that that if the houses at the bottom of the slope had been built, there would be no question of there being a garage there. Yet when they were built, there wasn't a garage, and yet there seems to be no mechanism by which the planning permission to put up a garage could have been rescinded to take account of the new circumstances. It just seems exceptionally unfair on the people now who have got a garage, and not just a garage, something that looks like a 2-storey building stuck right on top of their garage. That's right on top of their garden.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Frost. Councillor Hornby.
I share Councillor Wesley's view that it's a great shame that, as more or less what Councillor Ritchie was saying, that it's so close to the trees. It just seems unneighbourly as much as anything else. But as I understand it, we wouldn't be here tonight had it not been for the main growth, as I understand it, is over the height. And there's a bit of a disconnect that doesn't make sense to me. I would appreciate some clarification. You said it's only marginally higher, and the report suggests it's at 0.3 metres. But that doesn't tally, A, with what we've heard from the neighbour, but more importantly, it's that photograph. it doesn't look like the original plans. If you remember those original plans where the height of the conifer was the height of the building, that looks way higher. In other words, it looks like it is much higher than it was supposed to be, and yet you guys are saying there's only 0.3 metres. What's going on?
I think the honest answer is the conifers are lower. The conifers are very trimmed because the land level at the back was always the land level.
But you know, so, I'm not an expert, but they don't look like they've been pruned. They're kind of bushy.
But the height of the building is on the land. It's on the land. It always was, and it is to the height it was, apart from the 3 metre discrepancy of the ridge.
And sorry, but just and connected with that, what if it's true that the proximity of that building destroys the roots in such a way that you don't have any conifers, whatever they are, and therefore no screening? That can't be allowed to happen, can it? But that wouldn't be acceptable, would it? To then you'd be the worst of all worlds. You'd have a building that's completely towering over there, with no screening. That doesn't seem bad.
Basically, it's a matter between neighbours in that sense. If they do development on the side and the hedge lines, they'd have to sort that out between them, really.
Okay, Councillor Longley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's always unfortunate when two neighbours sort of fall out over an issue like this, and this evening we've got to come down one way or the other. And it seems to me that the comment made earlier about due diligence prior to the planning being submitted for the 3 houses, it's unfortunate that the garage wasn't built at that time, because then I think we might be taking a different view, and indeed people may or may not have bought those houses. But we are where we are. So we've got to cut down one way or the other, and the options are we can either say no, put enforcement in there against all the advice and the cost that would entail. There would be an appeal undoubtedly, which a fair bet we'd lose, and we'd put a lot of resource into it. No, we are where we are. That's very unfortunate. We can offer sympathy, but little else. My view is we've got to go along with the advice and the legal situation. And I should be voting against against going down this route.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. Councillor Irving Swift, as your local member, come back to you.
Just one thing, it is very unfortunate, and for the people who live in 2, 4 and 6, it's going to change their life. But unfortunately, I think what Keith Daventry, our officer, said, it's right. The application was allowed before the planning application of the 3 houses. And now, if it's just a difference of 30 centimeters of height of the ridge, we have no room. The enforcement will not be enforced, and therefore the cost will be for the whole council to take. And as planning, I know it's in my ward, and I know that it is very, but I am here also to represent the council and on the advice of the officer, which may also, it's not a disagreement that it doesn't look nice, but it's because of the history of the site. And unfortunately, those neighbours are going to live together. And I always feel, as Councillor Longley, very sad when you are rich, and maybe the owner should have said, well, we will push it a bit further and we will not be in the position today. But as enforcement, I think the officer is right. We will lose if we enforce.
Thank you. Robbie, if it's a quick one, yes. So I want to go to that.
Following from that, I agree that 0.3 of a metre, was that the difference? If it was just 0.3 of a difference, then I would agree that there's no point in thinking too much about that. But I have in my mind the picture that is taken from within a house, looking at the way that see that one there. the skyline is of course appears much higher because the garage is nearer to the house. It's not would be just the effect of the 0.3 of a metre by a foot. It's the effect of it being closer that makes it more overbearing. Did the objector actually suggest that they're not looking for it to be pulled down, which seems sort of surprising. But does a garage really need to have that sort of roof in it?
Thank you.
If it restored the skyline to what its original position might have been.
But remember, it had planning permission.
I
So,
know that.
Councillor
I
Chapman.
just wanted to point out, Chairman, and it's a pedantic point, but you know me, the garage is not too close to the house is too close to the garage. The garage had permission first.
Just to the boundary, not the house.
Thank you. Right, we have a proposal, the application, not application, that it be recommended not to take the appropriate, not to take enforcement action. That has been seconded. All those in favour, please show.
4, 5, 6, 9.
Those against?
9, 1.
9, 2. Right, the officer's advice is to be followed, but no enforcement action will be taken. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much.